Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a life and leadership podcast where we are exploring the pages of the books on our shelves and living them out loud. My name is Denise Russo. I'm here again with my co-host and friend, Sam Powell, and we are exploring the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you don't have this book yet, you should definitely check it out wherever you love to buy books or listen to books. He has some great videos out on YouTube. He's got a lot of free information on his website, and you can even sign up for a newsletter where he sends daily tidbits on good habits and forming good habits. In fact, the name of the book is Atomic Habits, Tiny Changes That Make Remarkable Results in Your Life. And so we're going on a deep dive of this book. If you've missed any of the episodes, you can back up and listen to those at any time, wherever you like to listen to episodes. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe, share it with friends, and we'd also love to hear from you. We have a Facebook page called School of Thoughts Publishing, and we would love to hear what you're learning from the book, especially if you're living it out loud with us. So we are moving right along, and now we are into the third law of the book, which is all about making it easy. And today we are going to start with our chapter 12, which is the law of least effort. So Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I am, I'm excited. You and I have big things going on this weekend coming up. So by the time this episode actually airs, we'll be back from our retreat. So I can't wait to talk about that. And I'm sure habits will come up quite a bit over the weekend because they are critical for us sort of living our lives and figuring out our next chapters. So I'm excited. Today's a good day.
Yeah, awesome. So this chapter is about the law of least effort, and yet you and I this week are putting in the most effort for something. So I think that we're about to learn a whole lot about ourselves as we go through this episode today.
I like this chapter a lot because it really spoke to my lazy soul, right? I definitely like to, get a lot done. I feel like I've accomplished a lot in my life, but at the end of the day, it's like, man, they're like lazy is definitely, one of the things probably I'd attribute to myself, but I don't know that a lot of people would say that about me. Maybe my husband, he knows me the best, but I think that it comes down to this, this law here that, it's the law of least effort. And I think the good sum to kick this off is towards the beginning of the chapter where James says, conventional wisdom holds that motivation is the key to habit change. Maybe if you really wanted it, you'd actually do it. But the truth is our real motivation is to be lazy and to do what is convenient.
I think that's so interesting to hear you say this because I would never characterize you as lazy. If anything, I would think that both of us are characterized as continuously busy. But I think that what I'm learning from this chapter is what he's describing and what you just shared, which is to figure out the ways to do the many, many things we want to do, have to do, and can do with the least amount of effort.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly it. I'm a big advocate of rest for people, right? Like I think people need rest, whatever that looks like. And that looks like different things for different people. And so for me, like when I categorize myself as like lazy and why I think this chapter calls to me, and lazy is probably the joking term for me because that's probably not the right word, but it's the least effort, right? How do I get to the point where I am resting, right? How do I do this in the way that's the easiest, right? It's why I'm such a systems person because the systems are the least effort, right? How do we set this up in a way to where I don't have to think about any of it? I just do it, I move forward, and that's really it. And James kicks off with an interesting story. You said you really liked it at the beginning of the chapter about how agriculture grew through the world, and it's a kind of a nice illustration of the law of least effort.
Yeah, so this story is really fascinating. So picture in your mind the way that the globe looks. If you can imagine North and South America on the left-hand side of a flat picture, like a 2D picture, and then Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia on the right-hand side. And what James was describing is that agriculture grew faster in the European continents, areas, European and Asian continents, faster than it did in the Americas and in Africa by one simple thing and reason. What he described was that if you can imagine looking at a map, that anywhere from the westernmost part of Europe to the easternmost part of Asia and all of that landmass is really very horizontal. It's very wide and scrunched down, almost like a hamburger bun. But if you think about Africa and the Americas, it's very narrow and vertical. And so what he was describing is that the people that were planting and harvesting in Europe and Asia on this horizontal axis had the same climate, the same weather, the same seasons, the same growing types. Granted, there were little variances in the different countries, but generally sameness, as opposed to just even think of just the United States. The way that we grow things in Florida are very different than the way you grow things in Pennsylvania because of the climate and the temperature changes. But it was interesting to me as I was thinking about this story where it was describing that the law of least effort was to be on this horizontal plane. And it got me thinking about growth mindset. So if you think about people that don't have a growth mindset or people that put the least effort into their growth, they're kind of like on a horizontal plane, right? They come in, they do their job, and maybe they do a good job, but they go home at 5 and they do the same job for 5, 10, 20, however many years till they get their turkey and their watch. I don't even know if they do that anymore, but the idea is that the least amount of effort is the least amount of variance. But if you're a growth mindset person like we both are, even though it's hard to imagine that in the story, he talks about it was hard to have consistency and agriculture, it's hard to also grow because there are differences in climates, there's differences in temperature, there's differences in cultures. But in order to grow, you have to make a climb. And so that vertical access really spoke to me about how this chapter is about the least amount of effort, but I think that it's also about the least amount of effort to do smart things.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that leap that you made from this story about how easily agriculture grew across Europe and Asia because of the same climate to this growth mindset. And then that's interesting. My mind didn't go in that same direction, but I really like that thought process because you're right. Like if you're somebody who prioritizes personal development and growth and things like that, I mean, it's difficult, right? You're going from, growing peanuts and cotton in the South to, sweet corn and grapes in the North, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're it's very different in the way that you approach those things is very different. And changing and growing along with that is quite difficult. And I don't know, that's interesting. I really hadn't thought about that, but it made me think of kind of as this chapter progresses, there's this part where James says, on the tough days, it's crucial to have as many things working in your favor as possible so that you can overcome the challenges life naturally throws your way. The less friction you face, the easier it is for your stronger self to emerge. And so I think about that, right? If you want to be somebody who grows, like everybody's going to face these tough days, right? These demotivated spaces, right? Motivation waxes and wanes. But if you can set up your environment, if you can set up your system, which is James, he says it over and over and over again in this book, and you reduce that friction, you're more likely to do it, right? So like if you wanted to eat healthier, if you do not have junk food in your house, if you do have your lettuce already cleaned and chopped up, if you do have, the banana on the counter, right? If you reduce all the friction and all the points to getting there, it's much, much easier. I was just talking with a friend on Monday and we were talking about how hard it is to maintain like working out, busy, active lifestyles as working mothers, right? We're about the same age, right? We've got kids about the same age. And we're just talking about how difficult that was. And she and I had the exact same complaint about it, right? It's not that like it's hard to go work out for 20 minutes or whatever. She's like, it's the getting dressed, going to the gym, putting on, like then working out, then coming home, then taking a shower, and then doing whatever. And then by the end of it, I was like, yeah, I don't have 3 hours every day to commit to this. And it's like, I think about all that friction. And so I don't even try most days to do it. And so, that's, when I think about that and I think about those struggles of growth and those struggles of where you want to go and, having to be that type of person, that's what I think of with this chapter is where can I cut that friction out to make that easier for me?
Making things easy, making things accessible, making things simple. It kind of makes me think about an example of something that happened just recently in the news. So if you're catching the gist of this, everyone, we record these episodes in advance of when you hear them. So some of the stories we're sharing are happening in real time. But when you listen to this episode, maybe now it's old news. But hopefully what I'm about to share won't exactly be old news. It's just interesting news. And so this week in the news, there was a phenomenon called what they're calling, I guess, the Swift effect. And so what has happened is that Taylor Swift is allegedly dating Travis Kelce from the Chiefs, the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a tight end in the NFL. And obviously everybody by now in the world knows Taylor Swift. I think she's an absolute horrible vocalist. She has clearly not perfect pitch, but she has found a way to make a very successful career for herself. And
I feel like my sister's heart just twinged with your comment. She's such a Swiftie and just is obsessed.
Yeah, people are obsessed. It's funny because before I tell the story, I remember watching her on, I don't know, some award show. Maybe it was like the Grammys years and years ago. I was cringing so bad, Sam, because clearly her in-ear monitors, her, had earphones were not working. She sounded atrocious. It was so embarrassing. She was horrible. And a friend of mine who's a very famous vocal instructor and I were just kind of thinking how bizarre it was that this young lady at the beginning of her career was finding a way to break through clutter. But she did it in a simple way, didn't she? She made sure that all of her songs had a certain formula. They follow the same kind of storyline. And she's made an entire career out of being this persona that she is. And so it's funny now to think that she has changed a little bit of this persona in just the last week. So maybe your sister will like this part anyway. So she starts to allegedly date this NFL football player star who's kind of like a bad guy. He's kind of like not a bad guy as far as he's mean, but he's kind of like a cutting edge party animal looking kind of a guy. But he also has a lot of family values because in all of the interviews, he's interviewed with his brother and his mom and dad. And so there's something endearing about this sort of bad guy persona. So anyways, she ends up going to his game and is seen on television for just a quick minute where she's cheering for him and she's standing next to his mom in the box. So after the game, something incredible happened. And we're talking about, again, this chapter is about the least amount of effort and making something easy. Nothing about relationships is easy, and probably getting in touch with celebrities is not easy. But it turns out that what Travis did was he created a friendship bracelet for her, and the bracelet was his phone number. So he made something easy that was attractive with the least amount of effort, and somehow, because he's also famous, was able to get it into her hands. And now she shows up at his game. Well, the point of the story is after the game, this is just incredible. The sales of his jerseys have spiked 400% in less than 24 hours. Also, the home games, the sales for the Chiefs home games increased threefold in less than 24 hours. And also in less than 24 hours, he got 325,000 new followers on Instagram. So if you want to talk about the least amount of effort, this had nothing to do really with being lazy, but he did something simple. He did something easy. He did something that didn't really take a lot of effort. Now, granted, we hope that this relationship will last, but for, all history's sakes, it's probably going to become a hit record at some point, either because of the ups or the downs. And it's a really great ploy for Taylor Swift to break into the fan base of the NFL if she ever really wants to perform at the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love that. I just picture all these young women who are obsessed with Taylor Swift, like that's her demographic, like sitting around in Travis Kelce jerseys, like not understanding like a thing about football. Like as they're doing, there's plenty of women who love football, right? Understand it, all that kind of good stuff. But I just like her demographic and his in general, like probably don't overlap at all. And the fact that they're finding this like place is hilarious to me. And I love that. But you're right. Like there's with very little effort. I mean, look at all this stuff that's happening, right? Which is probably like PR dream.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
the same thing happened, right, with Harry Styles when he was dating, what was the lady's name? Olivia Wilde. So,
okay.
Lots of controversy. She had kids. She was with Jason Sudeikis. That's the father of the kids from Ted Lasso. So there was lots of drama around it because then there was a song that came out, As It Was, his big hit, As It Was, that people were like, ooh, I wonder if he wrote that song about her. And so then you see that after his tour ended, so did mysteriously the relationship. So you do sometimes wonder about the PR behind celebrity arrangements, I suppose you can say. But it's funny because in the book, if we go back to this idea of the habit creation, I suppose, or the law of least effort, one of the things that James says, I should say, especially if you are Swift fans out there, I do hope that their relationship is successful. but the book says sometimes you don't actually want the habit itself. What you really want is the outcome of the habit and what it delivers. Mm-hmm. And so the outcome of this habit is delivering really amazing results for the Chiefs, for Travis and his merchandise, for his brand, and even for her now bringing in a new audience of potentially people that are football fans that weren't Swift fans. And so, she's got this persona of being this kind of like, you look at her and think of her as this sort of cheerleader kind of a personality. Like I think there's even videos from old songs of her where she just has this sort of down home look, and yet she's a very, very successful, very smart athlete on her own stage, if you will.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and when we think about like what you're saying here, right, about you don't want the habit itself, but what you really want is the outcome, right? I think when we think about that, I think that goes back to, right, like I don't necessarily want to work out every day, but I would like to be healthy and fit and whatever reason you're going for. And when you think about what that looks like and what that habit is, then, James kind of frames these up as the habit is almost the obstacle, right? So when we think about friction, right, we're trying to reduce friction in this chapter and the law of least effort. So we think about that friction, the habit itself can feel like an obstacle, right? Like my friend and I trying to, work out more regularly, right? Like the habit itself is actually friction itself. And so how do you pull that back? And James says that habits are easier to fit are easier to build when they fit into the flow of your everyday life, right? So if it's something that just naturally works with what you do, then your chances of success really go up in this friction space. And this is something I always coach people on when they're trying to change behavior, they're trying to do something different. I was like, I want you to take a week and observe your behavior. I want you to write down what you do. I want you to look at where could this actually fit in, right? Like if it feels hard and you want to do this in the morning, where does it not feel hard, right? Like when does it trigger in your mind that, oh, I wanted to do this or that or whatever, right? So thinking about how do you reduce that? I always call this lowering the cost of entry, because I think about like, getting into like a sporting event or a, amusement park or something. It's like, how do you lower the cost of just getting in the door so that you can have the experience and have things going? And so I think about, I really think about that in this space is how do you look at your life? How do you find that flow? And how do you reduce that effort, right? Like the bracelet thing with Travis was a great idea because that's one of Taylor Swift's big things, right? Like that's what all of her Swifties do. They exchange friendship bracelets at concerts and things like that. Like that's one of her big things. So to fit in and to just slip right in with something that means something and is, and it is something everybody does, right? Like the friction is kind of decreases that friction. It sort of builds that like, oh yeah, this just fits into what we already got going on here. That's awesome.
I think there's two powerful ways, Sam, that people can achieve more with less effort without being famous. So one way you just discussed, which is the power of coaching. And if you're listening and you don't have a coach, don't know what coaching is, maybe you do know what coaching is, you've been thinking about getting a coach, why don't you reach out to us, at least for an intro call? It's no charge. Let us talk with you about the power and the benefit of engaging with a coach, because sometimes, like you were talking about working out with your girlfriend, it's easier to do things when you have an accountability partner or if you're with someone. Like for me, I typically go much harder in my working out time if Olivia's with me. And when I have to do it on my own, something always will come up, which is usually the buzz of a washing machine or the dinging of a dishwasher or, I don't know, social media. So having accountability through a coach can be really a powerful help. The second thing is that you could do right away, right now, today, is the power of journaling. I know that, Sam, you and I both journal quite a bit, and we introduced journaling in one of our global leadership development programs that we deployed for people all over the world on every continent. And if you really want to work on you for you, it's very simple. So whether you buy a pre-made journal or you make up something your own and just use blank paper, if you think about things like what your intention is for the day, and maybe if your habit is that you want to be able to eat healthier, maybe you start to write down the things that you're eating today all throughout the day. One of the things that struck me in the book, it's at the end of the chapter, kind of, where it's talking about getting rid of things that are not serving you well. I started thinking in my journal, what I've been doing is I'll write down what I'm eating, but what I don't do is I don't write a trigger if I want to eat something bad. So I'm starting to think that maybe this week something I'll do is if I really feel like I want to have something I know I shouldn't have, I think I'm going to try to create a new habit of writing down why I think I want that thing, because I'll bet if I do that, I'll end up not having the thing.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I like that. And I think that goes into kind of the big last point of this chapter is James says, call it prime the environment for future use, right? So you're thinking ahead to what you might need to do and what you might need to think about. And James talks a lot about how environment is one of the biggest factors about success. And so what he talks about is priming the environment, right? Like having the room, having the space, having the whatever around you, the people around you set up, right? Accountability buddies, like that kind of thing, like having this all set up to where you reduce all the friction as much as possible, right? So like if you want to work out, they tell you to lay your workout clothes out, the night before, right? Meal planning is a big thing that does this, right? A lot of people will suggest that. I had a dietitian suggest that one time when I was working on a medical kind of health issue that I was going through. And she was like, the best thing you could do for yourself is to plan, take a day a week and just plan it out, what you're going to buy, how you're going to make stuff, whatever. She's like, because then it's like you don't think about it the rest of the week, right? It's not that in the moment, oh my gosh, what do I do now, right? You're taking down some of that like decision fatigue that's going on. And so he really talks about that. And one of the examples that they used in this chapter that I picked up for my daily routine is resetting the room, which I think I told my grandmother about or somebody, maybe my aunt, she loved it. we were talking about how, oh, I have to clean the house. And it's like, no, I just have to reset the kitchen, right? Like, it's not, oh my gosh, I have to put the dishes away, I have to do whatever. It's like, nope, I'm just bringing it back to neutral, right? Like, I've set the environment up to know what neutral and clean and ready looks like, right? Like my living room, I know exactly what my living room is supposed to look like in its set up fashion. And so then it's just about resetting it, right? It's picking up the pillows that my son threw on the floor, moving his dirty socks over to the laundry room, like, right? It's like that kind of stuff. And so it sort of takes away some of that friction of like, I've got to get things moving, and just does it. And the chapter describes this as being one of the guys, Oswald Knuckles, is quoted as saying, people think I work hard, but I'm actually really lazy. I'm just proactively lazy. And I love that. Like, I want that on a t-shirt. Like, I am proactively lazy. Because I think that, like, when I think about that, that's, I don't know, that when I think of lazy, that's what I think of for myself, is like, I'm just looking for ways to make things so easy and so effortless that it's just easy to do, right? So you're like, oh, you're so organized. No, I'm just proactively lazy.
I love it. It's a new catchphrase. So this chapter was really around following the law of least effort, because we naturally gravitate towards things that take the least amount of time, effort, and energy. And to create environments where doing the right thing is as easy as possible. I try to reset my room as well, like you were talking about. And one of the things that frustrates me so much is what you were saying about like Austin socks on the floor, times it times 3, because I've got Olivia Vincent and Quinn stuff all over the place. And so I was picking up the living room the other night, and it was taking me, like, I was frustrated, right? I was folding blankets, propping up the pillows, cleaning up the cups that were left out. And it started to really get me to think about, I really think next year we're going to go through the life-changing magic of tidying up, because more and more and more I'm realizing that the time wasters in my life are the things that are causing less ability to make things easy and to make things simple and to make things with the least amount of effort. So I need to get rid of some stuff. I think that that's the lesson for me. I think my favorite quote ends out the chapter, and I'd love to hear your closing on this as well, Sam, is that James says, how can we design a world where it's easy to do what's right? Redesign your life so the actions that matter most are also the actions that are the easiest to do.
I love that. I think that's the question that, if I could post it to think about when I make plans, when I do things, right, when I coach leaders especially, is how can we design a world where it's easy to do what's right, right? And I think if you really think about that and you really try to live that one out loud, you're making the world a better place, right? You're making those around you better, right? I'm setting the stage, especially as a leader, like I'm setting the stage so that it's easy for everyone around me, for my team, for, those in my charge to do what's right. And that, I don't know, that quote I love. And as much as I love the, being proactively lazy, that's the one that really speaks to this last one's the one that really speaks to my leadership soul. And, really, I don't know, it's part of that vision that I want for the world.
I agree with you. Well, then let's end on that note, because that's a really great quote. If you haven't gotten a copy of this book yet, friends, this is the last sentence of chapter 12. And we would love for you to check that out, listen to our other episodes, and join us again next week. Next week, we'll be talking about how to stop procrastinating by only using a 2-minute rule. So that should be interesting and exciting, easy, simple, and short. Thanks for joining us today. On behalf of my friend Sam Powell, my name is Denise Russo, and this has been another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.